Did it do anything live? Are we live? I believe we're live. We're live. We're starting week 4 with episode 3. That's what happens when you start counting with 0. We did episode 0 to start with, and that first week was just, it was whatever that first week was. We're doing little different things every day. I'm here with my co-host, Dutch. This is Random Thoughts with Random Excess. Wayne and Shane, Dutch and Random. We're here every night, half hour or so during the week. Sundays we try to go an hour, and tonight we're going to try and go an hour. And I believe we're going to be able to go an hour because we got a really good show for you tonight. We're going to hear from Shane, almost exclusively, which just means I'm only going to talk about half the time, maybe 3/4 of the time. That's what exclusively somebody else talking on my show means. They get a 15 minutes. He'll get much more time than that, and I think you're going to love it. It's going to be really good stuff. It is really good stuff. Sunday night, episode 3, Serenely Speaking with Shane Schultz from Speaking Serenely. No, I'll be speaking serenely with Shane Schultz from Serenely Speaking. There's something in there. Some play on words there. Will come out the wash. Yeah, it'll all look good. But before we get started, what a night we had last night. 3 o'clock in the morning. We do the show Saturday nights. Of course, we do it every night. And then we watch it. We break it down. What did we see? What was I doing? What am I thinking about? And laugh at all the mistakes that I make. Not pushing the right buttons. Me on camera, but Shane talking, but me on camera. Microphones on, off, all that nonsense. We laugh about it, have a good chant, have a good laugh. And then we have the feedback line, of course, is open from 11 to midnight every night. And then after that, I do my shower, I get ready for bed, and then maybe watch an hour of TV. So I don't get to bed until about 1:30, which is not a bad time. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm being woken up. The house is on fire. Oh, what? And then there is a definite smell of smoke. It's a combination of should I panic, should I not panic? Well, how much? It was a fire in the neighborhood. It was a couple of houses down, actually 4 houses. Maybe got some pretty severe damage. Three houses for sure. Total losses. Like 2 doors down. So it was right, and the house right next door. They were actually evacuated and taken out to a city bus that was running, and keep warm. And then we were told that we could get in the bus if we like, but we needed to be up and dressed. And by the front door, especially, downstairs, out of the bedrooms, because we needed to evacuate on a moment's notice. The wind was kicking up, and so we were up from that's about 5:30 or so. So it didn't get up about 6 o'clock. So that was I was woken up. But that was me. I was trying to sleep from 1:30 to 3, but not Shane. Shane. Turns out Shane and I we live in the same house, and. So secrets revealed. We live in the same house, and he had been up all night because he's working on this project he's been working on. We've talked about it here a couple of times. As he's involved with his Serenely Speaking public speaking company, and they're launching their new podcast, weekly live podcast, motivational speaking. Getting people fired up. A Risen Strength that starts on Thursday. We talked about that. We talked about that a couple of times. He's been working on that, so he's been up all night working on that when we got the alert to get the fire and get out. So that's just Shane. He's a working machine. But so the question is, got Shane, of course, here in the room. Shane, is this just what you do? Do you ever sleep when you're on a roll like this? Or are you always on a roll? Give us a sense of what that's like for you.
Well. It just so happened that I decided to pull an all-nighter because of the announcement that we had that the podcast is going to be kicked off on Thursday on the 22nd. I also have a speech that I'm doing on the Tuesday, the 20th. So I'm definitely busy, and I just kind of put my mind to the task and said, well, I'm going to get all this done. And I figured that it was going to be probably around 2:30 in the morning. I don't sleep very much, anyways. I generally if I get 4 hours, we're doing good. And but I happen to be working on a number of things with regards to Facebook, regards to Twitter, regards to YouTube, and the graphics design and all this. I'm having fun, and all of a sudden, I hear the cat of all things was really trying to get outside, and it was making a meow that wasn't normal, and it was sort of like a mountain lion, and I thought it was sick. And so I happened to get up, and I thought I was going to have to tend to the cat, and next thing I know, I definitely smelled that there was something not right. And it turned out that unfortunately there was a significant issue that was going outside, and that's when I came and started waking people up.
Yeah, it was good. And we had the neighbors had they got animals, lots of animals, cats, dogs, birds. So our place was we held holding some animals for them during in fact they were evacuated. We weren't, luckily, out of what the next step would have been if we were evacuated. But it was pretty scary. It was But yeah, you're talking about, so you're getting all this stuff together, and you're doing your the Twitter with the Facebook and with the YouTube, the Google, similar to the stuff that we do on here. Of course, your organization is a much more professional organization than ours here. It looks like it 100%. It feels like it, and that's great, because that's what the world's all about. But yeah, and that's your background. I mean, you do things professionally. You've done a lot of things. I know, because I do know a lot about you, because it's gotten to know you, and more so probably than a lot of other people, because you have your stories of things that you've done. But I also know a lot more about how you felt about what you were doing, and sort of the inner workings, what was driving. And we've all had struggles, and you've been honest on the show about your struggles. At least tip of the iceberg type stuff. And you've mentioned some of that, and I was wondering if you could go ahead and give us a chance to tell us a little bit about your story, personalize a little bit, give the people insight a little bit that they might not, even people who know you might not know about you, that kind of stuff. If you could do that for us, that'd be great.
Well, the first thing is that not only did people not know me, I didn't know me. To make a real long story a little bit shorter, even when I was very young, I had a way, it's like I had a lot of advantages that some just don't get to have. I never had to worry about a roof over my head. I never had to worry about food on my table, clothes on my back. I was even fortunate enough in order to attend a high school that was number 6 in the country in academics. If you put all that on paper, there was really no reason why I should struggle, and in fact I should succeed in anything that I wanted to do, and I had that support in that sense. But that's only one side of the story. The other side of the story is that I learned the art of self-loathing at a very early age. I hated my looks. I hated my voice. Some of you, are my age or older. Cassette tapes. You had the recorder, the tape recorder. You go ahead and you hit record, and and you put in your cassette, and next thing you know, you hit play, and all of a sudden there's somebody else's voice on that cassette. It can't be mine, and when I realized that it was mine, I hated it, and I even hated my name, and that was something that was kind of to the core to me. I just did not like who I was, what I was, and why I was. There was no reason really to think that was going to happen, but it did. And I just happened to not understand it, so I just moved on. It's like a lot of families in that have a family structure of, look, there's going to be challenges in life, and you're going to have to live with those challenges, and you're going to have to move on from them. Otherwise, you're going to be in a lot of pain for the rest of your life. And so I did. I would. And I just never realized as to how much things were really staying with me. It was almost like Velcro. It was, if I could give an analogy, most people, when they have an emotion or something that comes into them, it processes like right then and there, and it's gone. It's for better or worse, it's gone. Me, what it would do is it would be like Velcro, and it would be like every emotion would be sticking to that Velcro for a while, and then when I would be weak or I would be tired or whatever the case may be, then that whole thing with all those emotions would go all at once, and it would be very detrimental for me, and to the point as to where it literally would take my breath away. It would make me want to not like myself even more so, and that led to even worse things down the road, of which we'll talk about. So that was very early on, and I put my parents through quite a bit, not intending to, but there's no question now that I look back on it, there was a number of things that they did in order to combat the way that I was acting. They didn't know exactly what was going on with me. They took me to a number of doctors. I went to a psychiatrist, like Hemingway type of style, as to where, well, how did that make you feel? And and I'd sit there and I'd tell him, and he says, well, every time that we would leave, he would just say, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just a boy being a boy, and and he'll grow out of it. And it was to the point as to where, my parents, they didn't understand, and God love them. I wouldn't be able to understand if I was in their point. I mean, there was times as to where I literally would write death notices to myself, and when I would, some of them I would allow my parents to find. And if you can imagine being a parent, all of a sudden there's a death threat that's to your son or daughter, whether or not that you believe it or not, it's going to put you in a different kind of frame of mind. And so they definitely were scared. They definitely were worried and everything. They would bring me to another doctor. Another doctor would say, oh no, he's just a boy being a boy. And it just got to the point where they were so desperate for an answer that they weren't getting, that they started believing that I was just telling them what it is that the doctor wanted to hear. And whether that would have been true or not, I ended up being basically stuck with a name called Master Manipulator that stuck with me like glue throughout my life. And I came to the conclusion that the doctor wasn't going to help me. And so I needed to figure out a way in order to be able to get out of the situation that I was in as far as inside. And I decided to do that on my own. And I decided that I was going to change my life no matter what. I didn't care if anybody liked it or anything. And I even remember it was when I was 16 years old. And, things got worse as I would go into high school. And it wasn't because I wasn't given the opportunities to do a lot of things. It was because I was growing older, and as I was growing older, I was becoming more aware that I was sick, and that there was something very wrong within me, and that void was even bigger than what it is that it started out to be. And so, anyways, I made the decision I was going to change, and I can remember being 16 years old, and I was in Glass Lake. For those who are out in Sand Lake area, my hometown, I was in Glass Lake, and there were some kids that were splashing, and I was walking into the water, and all of a sudden the kids, I'm older than them, they're younger than me, and they decide that they're going to start splashing me, and I was mad because it was like, well, I'm older than you, you should respect me, and it wasn't happening until I finally said, you know what, screw this, and I just jumped in. And when I jumped into that water, I kind of was reborn in my own mind. And I said, that's the way I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And I changed things totally around, for better or for worse. And sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't so good.
And I think many people can probably identify with get to a point in our lives when we're younger, and it's not going the way we want, and so we're going to do something to change it. And what ends up happening, and you mentioned for better or worse, is we end up doing anything. And sometimes the first thing that we pick that feels good or feels right is not necessarily good or right for us in the long term. And in my case, I ended up turning to alcohol. And I'm not telling any stories out of school here because you talked about, you know, you and I are both addicts. But you know, your drug of choice is not alcohol, and it's not even drugs actually. And for those regular viewers, Shane's mentioned it, but you know, it's a little bit of a different addiction, or at least one that people talk about or they come in contact with. And so I wonder if you might want to share with people, you know, your addiction and sort of that sense of trying to invent the new you. How did that inventing the new you and your addiction kind of work together against you, um, or you know, for you, or just, you know, share again about your addiction. And one thing I like people to kind of listen for is, especially if you have experience with addiction, is to listen for the commonalities. You know, addiction is addiction is addiction, a lot of times, and so it's, you know, we shouldn't judge people by their addictions, especially if we know enough about addiction. We should recognize that, hey, we're just trying to do something to feel different or be different or think different. We're trying to do, and sometimes we don't make smart choices early, but we get stuck into these patterns and, you know, these maladaptive skills. So Shane, if you would, could you go ahead and share some of that addiction story with?
Yeah, I definitely I could talk about my addiction probably this show and another 3 shows after it, you know, one after another. You know, my biological father, he exited my life at an early age, but I learned later on that he had both a mental illness and he had addiction within his life. He was, you know, he dealt in drugs. He also was a very heavy alcoholic, um, and I knew that. And the way that I knew that, I don't recall any amount of time with my biological father as a child. Um, don't know why that is, but let's just he left pretty early, so we'll go with that. Um, I learned about my biological father through my grandmother, through the newspaper, because of all the times that he was arrested. You know, he got arrested, you know, dealing drugs. He got arrested for DWI. He got arrested for fighting with the police. He got, you know, he got arrested for any number of things. And my grandmother would basically teach me about my father through the newspaper. When I learned about when my mother told me, which I was about, I don't know, I was about 8 or 9. I was told that my father, who I know as my father because he's the one that raised me, and his name's Ken, whom I respect a great deal. He was my father, and I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and I remember them saying that, well, you have another dad, and I was very confused, and it really was kind of almost traumatic in a way, because I didn't understand, and to a point, even back then, I kind of realized that I was left, you know, and I understand that things didn't go well between him and my mother, but that didn't mean that he had to be gone. You know, he could have, you know, written a letter or something, you know, anything like that, and none of that was there. And what happened is that I used to be with my father on a stock car team, and in Lebanon Valley, and my mother was watching from the stands, and she saw that I was on one side of the stock car, on one side of the driver's side of the car, and my father, my biological father, was on the other side of the car, and we were both looking in the same direction, and she thought for sure that we would have recognized each other, and it scared her, and you know, and you know, so they decided we need to say something, and so they did, and when they did, I wanted my father who raised me, because I loved him dearly, and that's who I wanted to be my father, because I had no idea what my biological father was. And then when I learned about my biological father, I even more didn't want to be like him. And so, so anyways, because of his addiction and so forth, I made a point to not get involved with addiction. I did not drink. I did not do any drugs whatsoever. I still haven't done any drugs that are outside of my prescriptions. I've never done drugs. Alcohol, if I have maybe 1 or 2 drinks a year, that's a lot. I'm not a real fan. I don't like beer or anything like that. So I like sweet drinks, but I mean, I knew to stay away from it. But at the same time, I had no idea that gambling was an addiction. And in my childhood, I've always liked sports, and I was always good at sports, and I was always able to keep statistics in my mind. I knew how many home runs Reggie Jackson had on a given year, and all this, and I knew what the ins and outs of what was going on. Didn't realize that sports was going to be part of my addiction. And it just was a great fit. And so, okay, fine. So I can make money off of betting on sports. And it just kind of fit. And so, so with that being the case, I was in high school. We did football cards and stuff like that. And I won some money and everything. And I remember when I had my first bookie, and I won a significant amount of money. And it was the first time. And I mean, I took a small dollar amount, and I made a significant amount of money. It was around $8,000. And I remember going to the bar to pick up that money, and I never believed it until I looked into the paper bag, and they said, "Don't look at that," And it was like, so I had $8,000 at the time, and I wasn't even 18 yet, and I didn't know what to do with it. My girlfriend knew what to do with it. What I mean? She had an idea, but I didn't have a clue. I just knew that it really validated me and my ability to be able to pick the right teams. Probably the worst thing in the world was that I won in the beginning, because I definitely had a natural high that I never was going to achieve again. And, as I got older, it became more and more involved. And then bookies didn't pay, and I would lose, and then the bookies wanted to get paid. It was, it's not like it's a gentleman's agreement, really. I mean, it is an underground world. So, back when I was young, I used to play video games. And I used to be on the way to school and on the way back, and with my friends, the Friars and Scott Kinney and all that, we would go and we would play video games at Cumberland Farms, Pac-Man and all. Well, looking back on it, I used to steal quarters all the time in order to play Pac-Man, because I was truly addicted to video games. And I used to steal quarters away from my family, from anywhere I could find a quarter. That's where it ended up in Pac-Man. So I was an addict, whether I wanted to be or not, in the beginning. And so so as I got older, it got more and more involved. And I was working, so then I was using more money. I was losing more money. I finally decided that I was gonna, I wasn't gonna play anymore. I wasn't gonna be a loser anymore. I was gonna be a bookie, because I know what the definition of insanity is you're trying the same thing and you're looking for a different answer. So I'm trying to switch it up in my mind, in my distorted mind, which I have distorted thoughts. That's a disclaimer that I'll give you right off the bat. so I decided I'm going to become a bookie. Well, again, things went really well as a bookie in the beginning. And, it's like, and it was cash. I remember, a UPS envelope would come in and it was like, there's money. And it was like, hey, this is great, and thinking that this is the way it's going to be from now on. and, but I'm not going to go into all the details and everything because, I don't want to trigger anybody or anything like that. And we don't have enough time. But the bottom line was, with my addiction, I could not stop. No matter how it is I did it, no matter what it is that I did. I, just like any other addiction, I made a fool out of myself in a number of different ways. I put myself in danger often because it is an underground world. And I remember one time as a bookie, and it's like I went to the guy owed me money, and I came up with this grand idea. It's like I'm going to tell this guy. It's like I'm going to say, hey, you stole my wallet, as he's walking out of a casino in the Bahamas, right? So you stole my wallet, and it works perfect. Guy comes out, you stole my wallet. He comes running, and he runs, right? And we catch up to him, and I'm tuning him up a little bit and everything. And one time I just come back, and I hit something behind me, and there was nothing there before, and it was heavy. So I look. And there's this constable, of which is a police officer in the Bahamas, who is mammoth. He's like the Big Show in wrestling, And I'm like, wait, and I'm like, uh-oh. And he picked me up and lifted me off the ground. And, next thing I know, I'm in jail and everything. And so I'm like, okay, look, I understand. I hit you. I fully understand. I'm sorry. And I said, I don't want to get into it. I said, just let me make my phone call. And he totally ignored me. And I said, look, I understand, I hit you, I understand. Let me make a phone call. Totally ignored me. I said, look, pal, I have the right to call somebody in order to be able to help me out here. And he looks at me and he goes, you obviously don't know where you are. And I'm like, oh, I'm not in the United States anymore. And it's like, so those laws that are over here that we are privileged to have, not everywhere. So, long story short, they almost made me damn well disappear. And and that stems from my gambling and my addiction. And so it's like but what's worse yet, that didn't stop me. As I'm leaving, they said, we hope that you come back again, and I'm like, you're out of your mind, that ain't gonna happen, But as I go home, I'm gambling the very next week, and it put a divide in my family, just like any other addiction does with so many that are there. Again, they were probably out of their mind worried, probably out of their mind confused, angry, any number of emotions. And I was, an addict that was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And, I've had some experiences that, have definitely been horrifying to me. And they affect me even to this day. And, I actually went to a homeless shelter numerous times because of my gambling. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I've had some horrific things happen to me in a homeless shelter because of it, and it still didn't stop me. And one time that I finally said in 2006, and I'm 43 years old, so from 71, and figure probably I was gambling probably, I don't know, when I was 12 years old. To 2006, I finally said, I can't do this anymore. And I happened to be moving from the South and coming to New York, back home. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I decided to go into GA. And, and I was able to find something that would help me. And you know, I walked into that room and I said to myself, you have to do what this room says. And there was a situation with a girlfriend who and we're going to talk about codependency, um, who I decided I was going to try to help. And I literally said, my recovery can wait. So I tried to help the girlfriend be, gambling, because that's the only way that I knew how to make money outside of working. And you never can make enough money working in order to be able to do what I need to do. She happened to be she had been diagnosed with cancer in the past, and she was bruising in a way that wasn't getting healed and everything. So I was concerned, and I loved this woman, and I decided that I was going to help her. And so I said, okay, that's it. I can't do my recovery right now. I'll get back to it. Well, I got back to it 2 years later, and I was, my scorecard was, I had numerous investigations, county, state, and federal, against me. Um, my family pretty much, were scared to death of me. I lost a relationship that I was trying to save. And I was just bankrupt, emotionally and monetarily. So I walked in and I said to myself that I will not do anything outside of what this program tells me to do. I had to use it as a law. Some use it as a guideline. I had to use it as a law because I couldn't allow myself any room for manipulation. And thank God I did, because it really did save my life. It gave me a life that was outside of something that I had no idea was out there. And my life was so primitive. It was all about my addiction.